Welcome to my channel, INTJ Island. Today, I'm going to talk about the INTJ emergency response. It has been said that when an emergency happens, you want to have an INTJ around in order to handle it. Here's why. An INTJ always wants to be prepared for everything that might happen. He hates surprises. I think the Boy Scouts motto, where it says to always be prepared, was written by an INTJ. He looks at every situation with a mindset on identifying anything that can go wrong, especially dangerously wrong. He is excellent at understanding systems, and that means conditions which can produce an emergency, and they will jump out to capture his attention quickly. If he can't remove the threats, he will usually run over scenarios when emergencies might arise caused by these dangerous conditions. He often will dig deeply into possible scenarios and research responses before they are needed. Additionally, INTJs have a very large general knowledge base. We want to know how things work, and we usually do. And we have agile minds that lead with a solution whenever confronted with a problem. We consider complaining about a problem without looking for a solution as just useless whining. Move aside and let me fix it, will you? But what happens when an emergency condition pops up? You see the other side of an INTJ, the INTJ tiger. First off, extroverted sensing comes out to play immediately. This inferior function is eager to take in everything around you. Nothing gets by your sensing function. At the same time, the introverted feeling is tossed into a closet and the door is slammed. There is no time for wasteful feelings. There is only time to act. The extroverted thinking moves into the lead and determines what is the best action to take. It provides an immediate plan A, and the introverted intuition feeds it ideas for possible alternative plans in case plan A fails to be effective. The INTJ mind in an emergency is running on overdrive. It doesn't waste time hand-wringing, whining, or wishing the emergency hadn't come up. It dives into the middle of the problem, intent on tearing the thing to pieces. The quiet guy in the corner who keeps to himself and does his job superbly, if he deems it necessary, will be up and giving orders to anyone, even the company's CEO. There is no thought given to rank or privilege. There is the problem, and there is the solution, and whatever it takes to apply the solution to the problem is done. Don't get in the way of an INTJ in an emergency. You will be viewed as either part of the solution or part of the problem. Stand aside. The INTJ can be moved to physical action or verbal action depending upon the situation. A flooding problem could find an INTJ knocking people aside to get to the cutoff valve. A fire will find the INTJ with an extinguisher in hand and killing the flames before they get out of control. A wounded person will find pressure on the wound to stop the bleeding and bandages applied no matter how many people have to be commanded to move in order to get them. The INTJ tiger is usually never seen, but he is there, waiting. My wife calls me the doctor, because any medical emergencies that have come up over the years, I have moved instantly forward to take care of. I'm the one who examines wounds and patches them up after cleaning them and using antiseptic to avoid any possible infection. Things that come up, like something odd appearing on an arm or finger, I examine closely, and if required, I schedule a doctor's appointment. I am an expert at ace bandages and even learned to give my wife shots when she had her hip replacement surgeries. In 1971, I was driving to the post office in Janesville, California. I found my little VW Bug had lost its grip on the two-lane highway, and I remembered from driver's education class that you turn into a slide to bring the car back to where it should be. I did that, but I was now sliding sideways down the road. But I was not reacquiring my correct orientation to my direction of travel. My mind quickly analyzed things, and I decided that if turning into the slide wasn't working, I would turn the other way and see what happened. My car spun around. For a moment, the rear of the car was pointed in the direction of the slide, and then finally I came all the way back to where the front of the car was pointed towards the post office, and I was back on course. When I was stationed on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, I found out how many electronics technicians it takes to change a light bulb. The said bulb was way up high on a vaulted ceiling, and so it took 3 of us. One went up the ladder, while 2 of us held the ladder to keep it steady. The guy who went up to do the bulb switch fumbled it when he took it out, and it was heading for the floor to make a real mess. I reached out and caught it without thinking. The other guy holding the ladder had his eyes grow round, and he went on and on about how I had caught the bulb when he knew it was going to shatter on the floor. He hadn't moved a muscle towards catching the bulb. He was frozen, just watching it fall. I have always loved table tennis because my reflexes are good when I let my extroverted sensing out to play. I was fortunate enough to make the Midway Island All-Star softball team in 1977, and during one of the practices to get the team ready to play in Hawaii, I was playing third base and the manager was trying his best to hit a ball past me. He took it as a personal challenge as he hit the ball harder and harder to the left and to the right, and I caught every one of them. He just shook his head and finally gave up. When I was in 8th grade, I had a friend who came over to play ball with me. My yard was not large enough for a normal game, and so I came up with a short version. We were about 10 or 15 feet away from each other. The batter had a wall behind him with the strike zone marked out on the wall. If the ball hit the strike zone, it was a strike. Otherwise, it was a ball. We both threw as hard as we could with a wiffle ball, and if we hit a fair ball, it was a run. You would think it would be impossible to hit the ball, but we hit it often enough to make a game of it. Of all sports that I played in my life, the one I played at the closest to a professional level was racquetball. You have to think constantly. To get to the ball, you have to calculate how it will bounce, perhaps off of 3 or 4 surfaces before you get to it. While you are getting to the ball, you also have to decide where to place your shot so your opponent will have a hard time getting to it. You need to do many calculations instantly. Then you have to actually physically make the shot. I couldn't get enough of it. When my right arm hurt from playing too much, I played with my left hand and still usually won. One of the most painful things that age handed to me was having to give up racquetball, because my shoulders just wouldn't take it any longer. I went out with a bang, though. My last game was against a BYU triathlon athlete who had taken racquetball lessons. I buried him with my power serve. He was quite upset at losing. My shoulders were wiped out after that, however. I couldn't lift either arm above my shoulder level for months. I knew I shouldn't have done that, but I wanted to win. I always want to win. In emergencies, that whole competitive side of me comes out. I decide what it takes to beat the emergency, and then I do it. But I think the most powerful side of the INTJ, when it comes to emergencies, is his ability to avoid them. He spots things that can go wrong and makes sure that they don't. This side of me drives my wife to distraction. She calls me a worrywart. I wrote a short story for her called Dorothy Staircase. She had some trauma in childhood, mostly caused by her father's untimely death, and she doesn't remember anything of the time when her father was alive. She missed out on that, and it has always troubled her. She knows her dad was a good guy from talking to other people who knew him, and she wished she had memories of him. I wrote the story as a memory for her. It was set in the year before her father died, and he was a big part of the story. Dorothy was 7 years old. I gave her a schoolmate, a girlfriend named Kimberly, who was an INTJ. They were about to do something that Kimberly felt was unsafe, and she said so. The main character replied, "Worrywart." My wife was clearly frustrated by what Kimberly had said, and she said the words, "worrywart," before she turned the page, and it turned out almost like stereo because she read what she had just said. I laughed. I know my wife. I drive defensively and always expect other people to drive unsafely. It has saved our lives more than once over the years. However, during the 7 years we lived in the Boston area, the impatience of the drivers was like a perpetual application of shock therapy for me, especially after having just moved north after 6 years in the far more laid-back Norfolk, Virginia area. Let me give you an example to show the difference. If there were an accident on a major highway in Norfolk, an hour after the cars were cleared from the scene, you would often still encounter a slowdown at the point of the accident. People were not in a hurry. In the Boston area, as soon as the cars were off the side of the road, traffic was fully back up to speed. Once the cars were actually gone from the scene, you would never know there had been an accident. Tailgating was standard in Boston. If I wasn't going fast enough, I had a driver so close to me it looked like I was actually towing him. In all the years we lived there, I never heard anyone honk his horn because he was cut off by another driver, though that happened often enough. But if anyone was 1 microsecond too slow moving when a light turned green, the horn was hit instantly. They were in a perpetual state of hurry. My introduction to Boston driving was given to me when my ship pulled in for a visit in 1986. One of my shipmates was from Boston, and he had been a taxi cab driver there before joining the Navy. He wanted to show me some of the sights in town. So I ignorantly agreed and sat down in his parents' car that he had borrowed for the day. No e-ticket ride at Disneyland could match the terror I experienced as he drove like a cab driver through the heart of Boston. I had never seen drivers like that before, and he was moving through traffic madly as though it were all normal to him. I am from the Los Angeles area. I have seen crazy drivers before, but nothing I had ever experienced prepared me for that. Later, the ship visited Naples, and those drivers could at least match the ones in Boston. But I have never seen the like anywhere else in the United States. After 7 years, I had acclimated to the Boston School of Driving Insanity, and I got some very odd looks from other drivers when we first arrived back home in the Pacific Northwest. It took me some time to get back to non-aggressive driving methods. My level of stress on the highway dropped drastically once I was back to what I considered normal driving. Avoiding potential fires, trip hazards, electric shock, and other potentially unsafe conditions is where I live. My ESTP wife can't understand why I am so focused on avoiding accidents. Meanwhile, she has broken both legs, one of them twice, and broken 3 bones in her left wrist. She had to have knee surgery for a fall she took, and her right shoulder had to have surgery as well. But it has done nothing to dampen her love of a thrill, and she doesn't want to be bothered worrying about how dangerous it might be. As they say, opposites attract. She has pulled me into doing things I would not have done otherwise, and I have kept her from trying quite a number of things that were unsafe. I should point out that none of those broken bones happened in my presence. She was in full ESTP mode on her own. We usually form a pretty good balance, I think, but it is never boring. In closing, I think when you are in an emergency, you will find that an INTJ can be quite valuable. If you enjoyed the video, please click like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'll see you next time.